This is a story about Jake, a 32-year-old man who grew up in Cleveland in a lower middle-class family. His father worked at a steel mill, and his mother was a part-time receptionist. Throughout his life, Jake was seen as the middle child, often overlooked compared to his older sister Rachel, who was the golden child, and his younger brother Ethan, who was considered the sensitive artist. Jake worked hard to secure a better future for himself. He went to college on scholarships and student loans, living off ramen noodles and working part-time at the campus help desk. He later landed a job at a fintech startup, working tirelessly through 80-hour weeks. Within 5 years, he had become the lead software architect with an impressive salary. Despite his success, his family's behavior was something he couldn't ignore. For years, Jake had been the family's financial backer, helping his father after a layoff, buying his mother a new car, and even funding his brother Ethan's art studio startup. Rachel, his sister, also took advantage of his generosity, asking him for money during her divorce. In total, Jake had given his family over $180. Everything changed when Jake received a video from his cousin Pete, which showed a Thanksgiving gathering at his parents' house. The video revealed his family mocking him behind his back, calling him their personal ATM, and laughing at his expense. The video shook Jake to the core. He had been supporting them for years, but they had never once acknowledged him as a person, only as a source of money. Devastated by the video, Jake spent the night creating a detailed spreadsheet that tracked every penny he had given his family over the years. He realized he had been treated like an ATM for far too long. He decided then and there to stop enabling their behavior. Jake then took a week off from work, retreating to a cabin in the mountains to clear his head. He spent days reflecting on his life and the toll his family's requests had taken on him. On day 10 of his time away, he ran into Ethan, who had been searching for him. Ethan tried to guilt him into returning home to help with the family's financial struggles, but Jake was resolute. He stood up for himself and confronted Ethan about their exploitative behavior. The next few days, Jake received numerous guilt-tripping messages from his family, but he ignored them. Instead, he took the bold step of sending an email to his family, telling them that he could no longer provide financial assistance. He blocked their numbers and emails, cutting off the financial drain that had controlled his life for years. This was just the beginning of Jake's journey. The next day, he called his boss to take more time off and started to put himself first for the first time in years. In the solitude of the cabin, he found peace, focusing on personal growth, journaling, and even learning to cook. His mental health improved, and he felt lighter without the constant stress from his family. This was the first step in Jake's transformation, but it wasn't without challenges. He hadn't expected the backlash from his family, and they soon began to realize the consequences of their actions. The impact of his decision to stop providing for them would eventually lead to an important family meeting, where Jake would confront his family in person about their years of exploitation. A few days after the email, I was feeling more at peace than I had in years, without the constant demands and guilt trips from my family. I started to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in a long time. I met with a financial advisor to get my finances back on track. For the first time, I started thinking about my own future and retirement. I used to dream of a lake house, a place I could escape to and build something for myself with the money I wasn't sending to my family. I finally started making it happen. I upgraded my apartment with furniture I actually liked, instead of settling for the cheapest options. I signed up for a cooking class and joined a hiking group. I even started playing basketball again, something I hadn't done since college. The best part was that I no longer felt that heavy, constant anxiety. No more dread of picking up the phone. No more wondering what my family would ask for next. In the midst of all this, I met Olivia, a brilliant UX designer for a competitor tech company. She was passionate about her work, and we connected immediately. By our third date, I took her to a lakefront property I was thinking of buying. When she asked how I could afford it, I told her the entire story. She was taken aback at first, but her response was simple. "That's messed up, but I'm glad you got out. No guilt." "No, but they're your family," just understanding. It was a refreshing change. For the first time, I felt seen for who I really was, not for what I could provide. Olivia and I started building something together, and I could feel the weight of the past few years lifting off me. I realized I was finally becoming the person I was always meant to be, someone who valued himself, who knew his worth, and wouldn't accept anything less than respect. A few months later, I bought the lake house I'd always dreamed of. I spent weekends renovating it myself, learning carpentry from YouTube videos. Olivia helped when she could, bringing me picnic lunches and offering design advice. The house was slowly transforming into my home, built with my own hands and money. For the first time, I wasn't just working to pay bills and keep everyone else happy. I was building my future. Then, 1 week after moving in, I had to go to a hardware store for some supplies. While I was outside unloading my groceries, I saw Ethan. He looked terrible unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes, and wearing the same old band t-shirt from college. He was leaning against my car, and I knew instantly that he'd been searching for me. "Jake, you can't just disappear on us like that," he said, pushing himself off my car. Mom's been crying for days. I wasn't sure whether to be frustrated or disappointed. Here he was, looking for me. And yet he hadn't once looked for a real job in years. "How did you find me?" I asked, my heart racing. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place I could escape. "Ethan," I called out, frustrated. "What do you want?" He looked at me with his pleading eyes. "Dad's car is still sitting in the driveway. Mom had to borrow money from her sister for groceries. My landlord is threatening eviction," he said. I could feel myself cracking, but I didn't let it show. I put my groceries on the hood of my car and stepped closer to him. "You know what the problem is?" I asked him. 4 years of being treated like an ATM. 4 years of paying your bills while you sit around pretending to be an artist. 4 years of not a single thank you. And I'm supposed to feel guilty now. His expression changed from defensive to shock. He stammered, "We thank you all the time." "Really?" I shot back. "When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time any of you cared about my life beyond what I could give you?" Ethan stood there, speechless, his mouth hanging open. "I thought so," I said, shaking my head. "Now, get out of my way. I'm going back to my cabin. You can't just cut us off like this," he said, grabbing my arm. "Mom and Dad are too old to start over, and my art's just starting to get noticed. I had a guy from a gallery look at my stuff last week." I laughed. The same old Ethan story. Always on the verge of success. Always needing just a little more support. I jerked my arm away. "Here's a crazy idea, get a job." "What? And be a corporate sellout like you?" he sneered. That was when I told him about the video. I described everything I saw and heard, how they laughed at me for being their personal ATM. His face went from angry to shocked to guilty all in a matter of seconds. "Dude, we were just joking around," he said, stammering. "You know how it is when everyone's hanging out." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I don't know, because apparently my understanding of family was completely wrong." I got in my car, slammed the door, and drove away. I watched him shrink in my rearview mirror. He didn't try to follow me. And honestly, I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or worse. Back at the cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. For once, I had stood up for myself. For once, I defended my worth. And it felt good. I didn't stay long. I decided to cut my trip short. There was no point in staying if they knew where I was. When I got back to my apartment, I found 43 email notifications from my family, everything from guilt trips to desperate pleas. They were all designed to pull at my heartstrings, but one email caught my attention. It was from my dad, "Jake. We need to talk. All of us. Your place. Sunday at 3. We'll be there whether you respond or not." At least he was honest about the ambush this time. I spent the days leading up to Sunday preparing myself for the confrontation. I reminded myself of the video, of how they had mocked me, and my resolve never wavered. Sunday came, and right at 3:00 p.m. the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. There they were, Mom, Dad, Rachel, and Ethan. They looked like they hadn't slept in days. Mom's eyes were puffy from crying. Dad looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him. Rachel was fidgeting with her purse strap, and Ethan was staring at his shoes. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They filed in silently and took their seats around my living room. Nobody spoke for a full minute. The tension was palpable, Finally, I broke the silence. You wanted to talk, so talk. Mom started crying immediately. Jake, honey, we don't understand what's happening. You've always been so generous, so supportive of the family. I cut her off. I saw the video from Thanksgiving. The room went dead silent. Rachel turned white. Dad stared at his shoes, and Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear into the couch. What video? Mom asked weakly. I looked at them all, then pulled out my laptop and opened the spreadsheet. This is every dollar I've given this family over the past 4 years, nearly $190.00 so. I scrolled through the list, watching their faces as the reality of the numbers sank in. They had no idea how much they had taken from me. I thought we were a family that supported each other through tough times, I continued. But it turns out I've just been the sucker funding everyone else's lifestyle while putting my own dreams on hold. Mom was crying harder now. Rachel wouldn't meet my eyes. Ethan was staring at the ceiling. Dad was the only one really listening. It wasn't like that. Rachel protested. We love you, really. Then why? I asked. In 4 years. Not one of you has ever asked me about my dreams, my struggles, my life. It's always been Jake. I need money for this. Or Jake, can you help with that? Never once. Jake, how are you doing? Silence hung heavy in the air. I stood up, signaling that it was time to end this. I've made a decision, I said, my voice firm. The bank of Jake is permanently closed. I suggest you all figure out how to live within your means, just like every other adult on the planet. Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. Or you could get a job that actually pays enough to cover it. Plenty of single moms manage. Ethan tried to argue. My rent's too high. Get roommates. I interrupted. Or, crazy thought, find steady employment. Dad begged me. Jake, please. Your mother and I are too old to start over. We need you to help us. I looked him dead in the eye and said firmly, sell the house you can't afford. Downsize. Use your retirement accounts. Figure it out, like everyone else does. They all started talking at once, pleading, arguing, guilting. I let them go for 5 minutes before I stood up. Time's up, I announced. I have plans this evening. I didn't, but they didn't need to know that. You can't be serious, Rachel said coldly. You're really going to abandon your family over one stupid video? I laughed, but it wasn't humorous. It's not about the video. The video just showed me the truth. This is about 4 years of being used and taken for granted. Now, please leave. They left, but not before Mom played her final card. As she was leaving, she turned to me, tears in her eyes, her voice trembling. If you do this, she said, don't expect to be welcome in this family anymore. I looked at her straight in the eyes, my face calm but firm. Mom, I said, I haven't really been part of this family for years. I've just been its funding source. And with that, I closed the door behind them. For the first time in a long while, the silence in my apartment felt like freedom. I sank into the couch, expecting to feel a mixture of guilt, sadness, or regret. But no, I felt lighter than I had in years. It was as though a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had been lifted. I slept through the night without waking up once. My mind was at ease. The following 3 months passed in relative peace. I blocked them on everything phone, email, social media. I changed my routines, started shopping at different stores, even switched gyms just to make sure I wouldn't run into any of them accidentally. Without the constant financial drain, my savings began to grow. I even met with a financial advisor to help me plan for the future. It was the first time in my life. I was truly thinking about my own retirement, my own dreams. I upgraded my apartment, buying furniture that I actually liked instead of just going for the cheapest option. I started cooking real meals, learning new recipes, and began to enjoy the simple pleasures I'd long ignored. The best part was how my mental health improved. The constant background anxiety that had been a part of my life for so long, worrying about checking my phone, stressing about family gatherings, dealing with the guilt trips, vanished. I felt calm for the first time in years. I felt more focused, more at peace, and I knew that I was finally putting myself first. Then, one day, out of nowhere, I met Olivia. She was a UX designer for a competing tech company, and we hit it off immediately. She was passionate about her work, intelligent, and had a sense of humor that matched mine. By the third date, I found myself taking her to see a lakefront property I was considering buying. She asked me how I could afford it, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't ashamed of my success. I told her the entire story, and she listened with an understanding that was completely different from anyone else I'd ever known. "That's messed up," she said, after hearing everything. "But I'm glad you got out." There was no guilt, no "but they're your family" comments. She just understood, and that made all the difference. Olivia was someone who saw me for who I truly was, not just for what I could give. 6 months after cutting off my family, I had closed on my lake house. It was mine, something I had worked so hard for, and it was a symbol of everything I had accomplished on my own. The house slowly came to life as I spent weekends renovating it. I learned carpentry from YouTube videos, painted the walls, installed new fixtures, and transformed the space into my own home. Olivia helped me when she could, bringing me picnic lunches and offering design advice. It was an incredible feeling, seeing it all come together. A week after moving in, I ran into Rachel at the hardware store. She looked different, tired, less put together than usual, wearing clothes from Target instead of the usual Nordstrom stuff. I was shocked to see her, and we stood there in awkward silence for a moment. "Hi, Rachel," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Hey, Jake," she replied, looking down at her cart full of home repair supplies. "How are you?" "I'm good," I said, smiling for the first time in a long time. "Really good, actually." She nodded and looked down at the ground. There was a long silence between us before she spoke again. "Max is okay, adjusting to public school. It's been a transition, but he's doing well." My heart tightened a little at the mention of my nephew. Despite everything, I still cared about him. "He can call me anytime," I said. "I'm not the one I have issues with." Rachel's eyes welled up with tears. "Jake, I know we messed up, all of us. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. And I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry." I studied her face, looking for any trace of manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and regret. It was strange. For the first time, she seemed genuine. "How's everyone else?" I asked, not ready to accept her apology just yet. "Managing," she sighed. "Mom and Dad sold the house and moved into a condo. Dad's working part-time at Home Depot, and Mom's watching neighbors' kids for extra cash. Ethan, he finally got his act together. He's doing graphic design for a marketing firm. He still does his art on weekends." I nodded, surprised. "Good for him. None of us realized how much we were taking from you," she continued. "Not just the money, but everything. Your time, your dreams, your life. I got a full-time job now, assistant manager at Macy's. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. I'm doing better. I'm sorry it took losing you to realize that." I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a tiny bit of respect for her. I was impressed. "I'm glad to hear that," I said honestly. She handed me her phone. "Put your number in if you want to. No pressure. But Max really does miss his uncle." I hesitated for a moment. Then, I took the phone, typed in my number, and said, "This is for Max. I'm not ready for everyone else yet." "I understand," she said. "Take care, Jake." And with that, she walked away. I stood there for a while, letting everything sink in. It was strange, but I felt a sense of pride in Rachel. Maybe there was hope for my family after all. That night, I called Max. We talked for nearly an hour about his new school, his soccer team, and the model airplane he was building. Not once did he mention money or ask for anything, which was a relief. Before we hung up, he said, "I miss you. Uncle Jake, I miss you too, buddy," I said, and I meant it. It had been a year since I cut them off, and life had changed so much in that time. My lake house was fully renovated, and I had started my own consulting business on the side. Olivia had moved in with me, and everything was better than it had ever been. I still texted with Max and even met him for ice cream a few times. Through him, I heard how my family was doing, struggling but surviving. Rachel had moved up in her job and was managing at Macy's now. Ethan had stuck with his graphic design job and was doing okay. Mom and Dad were getting by on their retirement and part-time work. There was a sense of independence in them now, a sense of responsibility. It felt like they had finally hit rock bottom and realized they could stand on their own feet. Then, around Christmas, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. My heart raced as soon as I saw it. "Jake, it's Mom. How did you get this number?" I asked, feeling a pang of unease. Max gave it to Rachel. Who gave it to me? She said. Please don't be mad at him. I need to talk to you. It's important. I almost hung up right there, but curiosity won out. I needed to know what was going on. What is it? I asked. Your father had a minor heart attack last week, she said, and I felt the floor drop from under me. He's okay now, but he needs a procedure. Our insurance covers most of it. But we still need to come up with $112.00. So there it was, the first time in a year they reached out, and it was for money. My stomach twisted, and I was quiet for a long time. I see, I said, my voice colder than I intended. What makes this different from before? I know what you're thinking, she said quickly, as though anticipating my response. And you have every right. But Jake, this isn't like before. We've tried everything else. We've sold what we could, taken extra jobs, and even applied for assistance. This is really a last resort. I didn't respond right away. It felt like a test, but I was trying to stay calm. We don't expect you to just give us the money, she added, her voice breaking. We can work out a payment plan. Your father and I will pay you back every penny. I swear. Still, I said nothing. Jake, are you still there? She asked, her voice small. I'm here, I replied finally. I'll think about it. Thank you, she breathed in relief. That's all I'm asking. Just think about it. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time, letting the weight of the conversation sink in. Olivia came home later, found me sitting in the dark, and sat beside me. What's wrong? She asked softly. I told her about the call, how they needed the money for Dad's procedure. What are you going to do? She asked, not offering advice, just support. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to help, he's still my dad. But another part of me is afraid they're manipulating me again. She leaned in, her eyes full of understanding. What does your gut tell you? I thought about it for a while. My gut told me that this was different, that they really had tried everything else. This wasn't a handout, it was a genuine emergency. The next day, I called my mom back. I'll pay for the procedure, I said, my voice firm and clear, without any preamble. Her relief was audible. Jake, thank you. We'll pay you back. I promise every penny. I don't want your money, I said, but I do want something in return. Anything, she said immediately. I want a family meeting, I said. At my place, everyone needs to be there. There was a pause. Of course, she said. Saturday 2 p. MILL text you the address. That Saturday, they all arrived at my lake house exactly at 2 p.m. Their jaws literally dropped when they saw the place. That was part of the plan, let them see the life I had built for myself. I led them to the living room, which had huge windows that overlooked the lake. Olivia made herself scarce, heading out for a girls' day to give us privacy. I started the conversation carefully. I want to show you something, I said, pulling out my phone. I played the video, the one that had started it all a year ago. They watched in uncomfortable silence, their own voices mocking me for being their personal ATM, toasting to my generosity while they were secretly laughing behind my back. When it finished, I looked at them, each of them in turn. A year ago, I saw this video. I began, my voice calm, and I realized none of you valued me as a person. You only valued what I could give you. For a long time, that made me angry. It made me feel betrayed, hurt. They all looked deeply ashamed. But today, I said, I realized that video taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. It showed me that I was worth more than being someone's blank check. It forced me to value myself when none of you did. I gestured around the room, at the home I had built with my own hands and my money. Everything you see here, this house, my business, my relationship, all of it exists because I finally put myself first. Instead of pouring money into a bottomless pit, Mom was crying silently. Dad looked broken. Rachel and Ethan couldn't meet my eyes. But it was time. I'm going to pay for your procedure, I said, my voice softer now. Not because I owe you, but because I choose to. And after that, I'm open to rebuilding relationships with all of you, but as family, not as your financial backup plan. We understand, Dad said, his voice rough with emotion. We're so sorry, son. I know those words aren't enough, but they're all I have right now. Ethan surprised me. He spoke up, looking at me. I should have said this a year ago. Thank you for everything you did for me. I took it all for granted, and I was an ungrateful jerk. Rachel nodded. You deserved better from all of us. I'm sorry it took losing you to realize that. Mom just kept crying, unable to speak. I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw that they were different people now. Humbled, more genuine, maybe even a little wiser. I'll transfer the money for the procedure tomorrow, I said. And then, if you want, you can all stay for dinner. Olivia's a great cook, and she's been curious about my family. We'd like that, Dad said softly. As they followed me to the kitchen, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because I had gotten revenge by making them grovel, not at all. It wasn't about that. The revenge wasn't in making them suffer. It was in becoming the person I was always meant to be, someone who knew his own worth and wouldn't accept anything less than the respect I deserved. I watched them take in my beautiful home, my successful business, and my amazing girlfriend. And I knew they were finally getting the message. The bank of Jake was closed forever. But maybe, just maybe, Jake the brother, Jake the son, Jake the uncle, those versions of me could return on my terms, with my boundaries, and with true respect flowing both ways. During dinner, Dad asked about my consulting business, and he actually listened to my answer. Mom wanted to know how Olivia and I met. Ethan showed genuine interest in the renovations I'd done myself. Rachel asked if maybe I'd be willing to take Max fishing on the lake sometime. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. As they were leaving, Dad hung back when the others were out of earshot. I've never been more proud of you than I am right now. Son, he said, his voice filled with emotion. Not because of this house or your success, but because you had the courage to stand up for yourself, even against us, especially against us. I swallowed hard, not trusting myself to speak. He continued, I should have been the one teaching you that lesson. Instead, you had to teach it to us. I'm sorry for that. He extended his hand, and I took it. Then, surprisingly, I pulled him into a hug. Thanks, Dad, I said, watching their cars pull away. Olivia joined me on the porch. How did it go? She asked. Better than I expected, I admitted. I think maybe we can be a real family now. She took my hand, looking out at the lake as the sun set behind it, painting the water gold. You know what the best revenge is, don't you? I nodded, living well, and you're definitely doing that, she said, smiling. Life had never felt so good. Update 6 months later. It's been 6 months since that dinner. The relationship with my family is different. Now not perfect, but maybe something better. Something more honest. Dad's procedure went well. He's on new heart medication and actually following the doctor's diet recommendations. Mom sends me texts now, but they're about recipes she thinks Olivia might like, or asking how my consulting business is going. Not once has she asked for money. Ethan surprised us all. He got promoted at his design firm and moved into a better apartment with 2 roommates. He still does his art, but now he sees it as a passion rather than his meal ticket. Last month, he actually sold 3 paintings at a local art fair and brought me one as a housewarming gift. It's hanging in my home office now. Rachel is still, Rachel, dramatic and a bit self-centered, but she's trying. She got promoted to store manager and enrolled Max in some after-school activities at the community center that he actually loves. They come over for dinner once a month, and Max and I have our fishing trips every other weekend. The kid's getting pretty good. He caught a 5-0 bass last time. As for me and Olivia, there's a small velvet box hidden in my sock drawer. I'm taking her to Paris next month, something I could never have afforded while supporting everyone else. And I'm planning to propose under the Eiffel Tower. Wish me luck. The funny thing is, my family actually seems happier now, more grounded, like they needed to hit rock bottom to realize they were capable of standing on their own feet. Dad told me recently that losing my financial support was the worst thing that ever happened to them. Sometimes I think about that video, the one that started it all. At the time, it felt like my world was ending. Now I see it as the moment my real life began. Looking back, I realized my family never saw me, not really. They saw what I could give them, what I could do for them. And, in a way, I never saw myself either. I was so busy playing the hero, the provider, that I forgot to be Jake. The greatest revenge isn't making others suffer for how they hurt you. It's breaking free from the patterns that kept you small. It's growing into the person you were always meant to be. It's building boundaries that protect your worth and your future. And yeah, maybe it's also a little bit about the look on their faces when they saw my lakefront property. I'm only human, after all. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. For those of you dealing with similar family dynamics, remember you aren't obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm.